Hi, this is Christian from SSW, and today I'll show you how SSW.People can be extended using external data sources such as Dynamics 365 CRM, and how the build process can be triggered. So let's check it out. Here on my profile, I want to add Azure under my skills, and I want to include my GitHub account. And this will display my GitHub contributions chart, which is shown here on my GitHub profile. However, when I edit my profile, the fields are not found in the Markdown. They're actually stored in CRM. SSW.People is great out of the box, as it allows you to use Markdown and JSON files to store this information. If we have a look at our Northwind profiles, we can see that we're only using a JSON file. We don't need to use CRM. But if you want to keep all your employee data on one source of truth, you can link it up to an external data source, such as Dynamics CRM. We have done this for our implementation of SSW.People. But before I go into detail, let's update my profile and see how it works. So if I go to my CRM profile, I'm just going to add my GitHub URL, and I'm going to scroll down and add one of my skills. So I've got a new skill, Azure, save. There we go, so I've got my new skill, and I've got my GitHub URL. Save all that and go back to my profile. Now if I refresh my profile, I can't see my changes yet, but I have just received an email. So if I open the email, so here the email says I've made a change to my CRM profile, and these will appear in SSW.People after 30 minutes. So this time will depend on how long your builds take. For us, it takes about 30 minutes to get from CRM to SSW.People. And when I go into detail, I'll show you how this email is created. So we'll give the build some time, and then we'll refresh my profile and see the changes. So we've given the build some time to finish updating the data. So if I refresh my profile, we'll see we've got my Azure here, and we've got my GitHub contributions chart. Very good. So now my profile has been updated. So let's have a look at a diagram of this process and dive into the back end. So here we have the diagram for the rolling build. So when a CRM user entity is updated, this triggers a Power Automate flow. And then the Power Automate flow will update a flag to true. And this flag gets read by the GitHub action, so it knows when the data's been changed. And after it's updated that flag, it'll send that notification email to the user. And then once all that's done, we have the GitHub action, so that's been processing the updated flag. This GitHub action runs every 15 minutes and checks this blob storage. If the flag says true, which means that the data has been updated, it'll run the build. And then this build will kick off the Azure pipelines. And if the build is triggered, the GitHub action also saves the flag and sets it to false in blob storage. So this just ensures that it doesn't run multiple times when the data hasn't been changed. So let's have a look at the Power Automate flow and see the logic that's involved there. So if we head over to our Power Automate flows, we've got a couple here for SSW.People. We've got a few triggers, so when a user record is updated, we can run the build trigger and skill record is created or deleted. So this run build trigger is this flow up here. So this is just splitting it out. So if we have a look at the skill record is created one first, this is just a very simple, when that entity is modified, run the build trigger. The next one is a little more complicated, so when a user record is updated, we can run the build trigger. So this is the user entity, and then here we do a couple of checks just to make sure it's an employee entity. And then here we actually need to cache some of the values, because when Active Directory syncs to CRM, it can trigger an update on the entity even though the data hasn't even changed. So this makes sure that the data has actually changed before we trigger off a build. So now we've got our payload for the user. We get the existing user payload, and if it doesn't exist, we create it. So if we go down, we can see that we're comparing the before and after snapshot of the user data. And if nothing has changed, we just terminate the Power Automate flow. But if the data has changed, then we update the blob, and then we run the build trigger. This ensures the builds only run when the data actually changes. And if we have a look at that cache data, it looks something like this. So here's my user entity, and this is a snapshot of my data. And then if we have a look at the final flow, so this flow gets the HTTP request, it has the ID of the item and who modified it. This sets the update flag in blob storage, and it gets the user that modified the record, so some of the details like name and email address. We need to check if it was a deleted action. This is because when you delete a record, you are missing some of those fields like what it belonged to. So here we've got a couple of emails that get sent out just to inform the users that their profile got updated, and to the person that actually did the modification that it was received. So this will send, this will update the CRM flag. So if you have a look in Azure and we do a refresh, we can see that this flag has been updated to true. So the build will need to be run. So if we go to our next tab, which is the Git action, we can see we've got a new rolling build that just kicked off. So this runs every 15 minutes. And if we have a look into this, and if we go into the build steps here, we can see that this checks to see if the CRM has updated. So if we look into this step, we can see that the flag was set to true and it ran the build. So if we go back to our Azure blob and we refresh this, we can see that it's updated to false. And if we go to our final tab, we can see in the Azure pipelines that a production build has just been kicked off as well. This was Christian from SSW, and today I showed you how SSW.People can be extended using external data sources such as Dynamics 365 CRM, and how the build process can be triggered. Thank you for watching.